This is Tom Doody, middle-aged American living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Doody in a Google search from my site. This is Part 5, New York Times, How to Hide $400 Million. It's a story of an ultra-rich man hiding much money to keep it from the United States government and his soon-to-be ex-wife. November 2016, published New York Times. When the opposing parties finally met in Florida court, April 2014, the room was overflowing. Robert had sent his divorce lawyers. The companies had sent their own lawyers. There were lawyers for the banks. There were lawyers for the accountants. Even some of the lawyers had lawyers. Most important, some of these lawyers had brought thousands of papers of records with them to the hearing. Under normal discovery rules, Fisher might have spent months of years fighting for them. It took 4 days. Potter flipped through the boxes in the courtroom, yanking out whatever seemed interesting, while Fisher cross-examined witnesses on the fly. There were bank statements, emails between accountants and lawyers, a few organizational charts, tantalizing stampede, confidential, one-piece paper from a lender called Fifth Third Bank showed that Robert had claimed a net worth of $400 million. Even more, they had thought one document showed that Sarah owned a third of RSOP. In Canada court, Robert accused his wife of making wild accusations of absconding with her 2 daughters in Florida, but Fisher now had a growing heap of evidence, not only to boast of Sarah's claims, but also to root them in Florida jurisdiction where the client lived and he practiced. Seeing the dangers, Robert's attorney switched tactics, hoping to block the corporation fraud suit entirely and send Sarah's divorce back to the Canadian judge. She was a recent resident of Toronto. They argued to Judge Gillen, and the Florida court had no jurisdiction over the divorce. For Sarah and her husband, as for many members of the globe, 1% residency was an elusive and easily manipulated concept. Sarah was a British citizen with the United States green card, who now lived in Boca Raton. Robert was a citizen of Finland, also obtained a passport from Dominica. They had homes in at least 4 countries and spent a year living on their yacht. These parties are global citizens of substantial means, Judge Gillen mused from the bench. Their situation is a blessing and a privilege for them, but for this court, their lifestyle creates a challenge. Gillen decided to split the difference. The divorce would stay in Toronto, but the civil suit, the corporate fraud suit, would proceed in Florida, where many of the family's corporates were still run out of Boca Raton Office Park. In late April, Fisher assistants began stacking buckets of files in the hallway outside his office. A similar pile grew next door outside Potter's office. In May, they began reading in depth. First, they searched for the missing $73 million that had been sent on a tax return. It turned out that most of RSOP's revenue were missing at all. Instead, Fisher later argued in court and papers RSOP was transferring tens of millions of dollars to another company, one called Omega Partners. Omega was based in the Bahamas, which has no corporate income tax. RSOP and 2 partners, but Omega had only one, Robert. Omega didn't appear to have any employees. In fact, it seemed to consist of little more than a post office box and a government building in Nassau. But Omega did at one point have a lucrative contract with Robert's Florida company, Xacti LLC, to pay search engines to advertise his websites. The contract appeared to be extraordinarily bad deal for Xacti. For every dollar advertising Xacti purchased, it also had to pay Omega, Robert in corporate form, 58 cents. For this privilege, Xacti also paid Robert another $200 each month personally for management services. Robert appeared to be charging his own company to pay their bills. Fisher argued in court papers he was charging them so much, in fact, that RSOP was making almost no net income, yet Omega was taking in millions of dollars each year. With the stroke of a signature on a few pieces of paper, it appeared to Fisher Robert used Omega to make virtually all of his family's United States tax liabilities disappear. When Robert had done is known as transfer pricing, a practice that has come under growing criticism in recent years. Multinational companies use it to shift their costs to high tax countries and their profits to low tax countries. Often, there is little or no economic reality for these transactions. Apple, for example, is an American company headquartered in Cupertino, California. Most of the research and development goes on into the iPhone happens in California, but according to Apple, if you buy an iPhone in Europe and Asia, the intellectual property rights contained in your phone usually belong to Apple's subsidiaries in Ireland, where the company has negotiated itself a special tax rate of about 2%. Apple charged those subsidiaries relatively little for the rights to use this intellectual property, yet allows them to collect most of the money Apple makes in selling of the phone. Apple makes 2011 Irish subsidiaries, which conducted virtually none of Apple's research and all but a few of its products, collected 2/3 of Apple's 2011 worldwide pre-tax income. Fisher wondered whether Robert's transfers were rarely legal. He called Greg Polsky, a law professor now at the University of Georgia, who occasionally worked for Fisher as an expert witness. Polsky knew a lot about tax law, but as he later explained to me, he did not have a satisfying answer for Fisher. In theory, Polsky said, federal rules require that related companies charge themselves the same price they would charge some other company. But in practice, the prices can be difficult to second guess. Who can really say exactly what Apple's intellectual property is worth? The sophisticated people will hire high-price advisors who will come up with a study that gives them the value they want, Polsky said. The IRS has to decide if they disagree with the value, if they can both challenge and prevails in court. In August, European regulators ordered Ireland to hand over $15 billion in unpaid taxes from Apple, charging that if the company's special tax rate had violated European Union rules. Fisher didn't have time to wait for the IRS to take interest in Robert. He needed some other lever, a legal basis to look more closely into a myriad of offshore companies that appeared to be connected with the Robert companies. A solution presented itself when Fisher searched online for Robert's name one morning, learned about a long trail of consumer disputes Robert's companies had left behind, until he had saw a settlement with the Florida Attorney General. Fisher had assumed Robert was running a basically legitimate internet business. Now he realized that only Xacti had come under investigation, but also the investigation created an opening for Sarah. This has been Tom Doody, middle-aged American living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Doody in a Google search from my site. Thank you for listening. Have a good day, good evening, a restful night's sleep. End of part 5.